The New York Mets dropped their last two games in San Francisco, ending what was an overall great road trip on a sour note. On the show today, I'm going to discuss why the pitching was awful in those two games. I was wrong on David Peterson. We're going to get to that and the rest of the issues in the rotation right now, but also why there's still some optimism in the starting lineup. We'll get to all of it on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, before we get into anything else today, discussing the Mets series against the San Francisco Giants, I just have to open up, put my hand up and say, listen, I was wrong. I was dead wrong. David Peterson has made me look like a fool. He has been awful, and I've defended him. I have gone to bat for him saying, hey, I think he's going to turn the corner, and that start on Saturday had me selling all my David Peterson stock. I mean, granted, I'm still holding on to it. You know, you can't sell this low, and I still think he's a talented pitcher. If I wanted to put on my rosy red glasses again, I could say, oh, well, at least he got him through 5. But man, I mean, he just looked awful. And it was right from the jump. Gives up 4 runs in the first inning. Ends up giving up 2 in the second. Those 2 innings, I mean, it was like he couldn't get anyone out. Everything was a deep count. He was nibbling like crazy. And when he finally had to attack hitters, giving them very hittable pitches, whether it be fastballs they can handle, missing his spot, giving, way too much plate, whether it was, sliders that just hung right in the zone for guys. It was awful to watch. He looked like he just had no hope out there to get any outs. And, yes, eventually he was able to settle enough to give you a little bit of length, but it's not like those innings, were necessarily just David Peterson suddenly found it and was completely carving. I just felt like that was, a team in the Giants that's not great. They're only going to score that much on you. And, he was eventually able to stack a couple of decent innings together. But, I mean, this is start after start after start after start. And honestly, give the Mets credit for hanging in that game. I mean, they got it fairly close, right? At one point, that they cut it within 3 at the end by scoring a run in the 9th inning. But it was just never going to quite happen for them. But I do give the Mets offense some credit for still putting together some good at-bats and some things happening for them. But getting back to the main story of it all, it's David Peterson. And look, we could go start by start this season, right? First start of the year looked pretty good, but gave up 8 hits. So it was against the Marlins, 5 innings pitched, 8 hits allowed. Only gave up 1 run on a homer, 5 strikeouts, 1 walk, Then second start was that awful outing against the Brewers, 5 runs allowed, didn't make it past the 4th. Did walk 5 in that outing too, so that was ugly. Then you have the Padres start, which was pretty decent, right? Only gave up 2 runs, didn't quite get through 6, but there was some signs of improvement. And then again, this is where I continued to have optimism because I was like, all right, first start, it wasn't great, but he was able to navigate it. Second start was bad, but that Brewers team is hot. Third start was pretty good against a Padres team that, I mean, now we're looking at them and saying, how good is that lineup, even though we know it's going to be great this year. But early season results haven't been there for him. But you still, look at a lineup that has Juan Soto and Bogarts and Machado and say, all right, well, that was a good outing. And then the start against the Dodgers for him, where he gave up 6 runs, I still did not think that was just a guy that doesn't have it. I thought the stuff was still there. I thought he made some clear mistakes. There was a double to Austin Wins, if I'm not mistaken. There was the home runs to Freddie Freeman, for sure, 2 of those. And you just personally, I just excuse some of the issues away. This start against the Giants was as ugly as I've seen David Peterson look in a very, very long time. Probably the ugliest I've seen him, in my opinion, since 2021, when he was just a guy that was completely up and down. And the Mets can't afford this. Now, he's lucky that the Mets are in this situation that they have right now, with Scherzer on the suspension, with Verlander out, with Carrasco out, where they're going to run him back out there at least one more time. But if he goes out and he has another terrible start, David Peterson very well could find himself in Syracuse. And he could be there for a long time. Because you know what? You talk about a left-handed pitcher. I'm very happy, by the way, that I recorded an emergency podcast, not emergency, but a Saturday morning podcast after a good game on Friday, because that game was a lot of fun. The Mets rolled. Joey Lucchesi gave the Mets the best start of the season. If you're upset right now, Monday morning, driving to work, listening to this as your series recap, feel good about yourself. Go back, listen to that show instead, the Saturday show, because it was a lot more fun. But, regardless, if Joey Lucchesi is good again and Peterson pitches like this, I don't know how you can justify it. He's still got a couple of options left, so this is a guy that I thought was going to hold on to a rotation spot all year. I thought he could be a number 3 in a big league rotation because of the great strikeout numbers, because of what the stuff looked like last year. And he has not had it this year. Suddenly he's more looking at the changeup than the slider. The slider, he's lost it, and that was his best pitch last year. So I'm confused. I don't know what happened, and all I can do is sit on the edge of my seat again for the next David Peterson start and hope that he doesn't continue to make me look like an absolute idiot. We'll see, though. We'll see what happens with that one. Tylor Megill. I was selling on him. I didn't necessarily entirely buy into his great start, and unfortunately, that ended up playing out a little bit on Sunday. We're going to discuss that game in just a minute. Before we do, though, today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Pro Baseball GM. This is my favorite mobile game. I almost got to stop playing it. It's so much fun because I've always been a guy that likes to pretend like I'm the GM, and now I can do it. I can play out a season. I can manage every strategic aspect. You can hire your coaches and staff, manage team finances, scout and draft players, manage difficult personalities, navigate your franchise through free agency and all the ups and downs of a season. All of this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Baseball GM is completely free and playable offline, so you can play on the go as you want, when you want. Once downloaded, you don't need Wi-Fi to play. It's all there for you in app play. And Locked On Mets listeners are going to get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store. So make sure you check it out. To download the game, just visit probaseballgm.com. If you're watching on YouTube, scan the code or look it up on the app stores. That's probaseballgm.com. Check out the Ultimate Baseball GM. Start your dynasty today. After David Peterson's rough start on Saturday, we were all hoping that Tylor Megill would show up like Joey Lucchesi did. And unfortunately, that just didn't happen. He didn't have a awful start like Peterson, but he just did a lot of things that you hate from your starting pitcher. First one, you give up a run in the first inning. That's never something you want to see. You want to see zeros early because at least you can get into the flow and rhythm of a game, and you hope the Mets can get a lead early because a lot of times you get the lead early, you're going to win the ball game. So first inning, Mets unable to score. They go 1-2-3, bottom of the first. He gets a big double play ball, McGill does, but you have a runner on third base still because he gave up a leadoff single, then he walked Michael Conforto before getting that double play ball from J.D. Davis. Jock Peterson gets a hit, puts the Giants on the board. Luckily, he didn't surrender anymore, but after the Mets failed to score in the top of the second, and boy, did they have a great opportunity to. Bases loaded, 1 out, Francisco Alvarez up, and he hits into a double play ball. And I will say also with that at bat, I think that he did a nice job keeping the bat on his shoulder and showing a little bit of restraint and trying to hold back. You're seeing him make adjustments at the big league level, but still hits into a double play ball, which you can't have. He did atone for it later in the game, but that was the first of multiple situations where Alvarez did not come through with the bases loaded, and that, puts McGill in a position where he comes in with still no run support in that second, but then he gives up a homer to lead off the inning. Thairo Estrada Boom, 2-0, Giants up. Now, the Mets, to their credit, they went out in the third inning and they put runs on the board, or a run on the board, the third and the fourth inning, to get McGill a lead. So, third inning, Francisco Lindor, RBI double. McGill does a good job, puts up a 0. You like to see it. Fourth inning, the Mets grab a lead. McNeil gets a hit, Vogelback walks, Beatty gets a hit, another bases loaded spot for Francisco Alvarez. Strikes out. But the Mets are able to get a couple of sacrifice flies, and thanks to Michael Conforto, they're able to get a couple because the first one hits off the heel of his glove, so it's a sac fly in the books, but Cannon gets on base, no outs recorded, tied the game. Brandon Nimmo continues to be the best player in baseball, leading the league in Fangraphs wins above replacement right now, and had just a ridiculous road trip. His sac fly puts the Mets ahead, but what does McGill do? The last thing you want is when you get a lead to cough it up immediately. Not only to cough it up, but to not only have a tie game, but to cough up the lead and give it back to the other team. And that's what he did. Just a horrible fourth inning. Gave up, 3 hits to allow them to tie it. Force out, brings another run in. Gets out of the inning without it being a complete disaster. But at that point, he's at 81 pitches through 4, and the Mets just decided with a fairly rested bullpen to pull him from the game. And they got some amazing pitching early. Jeff Brigham looks disgusting. I did tell you a little bit about Jeff Brigham in the offseason, didn't I? Man, did he look good. Couple of strikeouts of some foreign Mets to start off his day. Conforto and J.D. Davis going down, and the Mets got back in it. Francisco Alvarez, as much as he struggled first couple of at-bats, with 2 outs, a tough pitcher in Tylor Rogers on the mound with that weird angle he throws from, he was able to take a pitch and crush it. And it's funny, too, because what have I discussed a lot about Francisco Alvarez? It is struggling with that high pitch. But here's the thing. The high heat is what he struggles with. You get a 72.7 mile per hour slider over your head, and apparently that's a pitch he can handle. And we got to see his ridiculous pop and why there's so much promise with Francisco Alvarez as he tied the game. Thought the Mets were going to just pull it out because that's the type of team that they've been, and they'd be able to win the series, and ends up capping off a great road trip. But the offense kind of stalled, and ultimately Drew Smith unable to hold on to a tie ball game when he's handed it in the 8th. Brooks Raley did give the Mets 1 scoreless inning after Jeff Brigham's 2 outstanding innings. But 8th inning, a RBI double for Mike Yastrzemski ultimately proves to be the difference. I did see some people very critical of Buck Showalter in his managerial decision because you had Adam Ottavino, you had David Robertson, both ready and available to pitch. You didn't go to them. You went to Drew Smith. Here's what I'd say about that. If Drew Smith goes 1-2-3, nobody even thinks about Adam Ottavino and Robertson. He trusts Drew Smith as a late inning guy. You might have been in an extra inning situation, right? Where maybe in the 9th, you would have gone to Ottavino. In the 10th, you go to Robertson to pitch in the ghost runner situation. I'm not mad at it. I don't love Buck Showalter's explanation about resting these guys early in the season when you have an off day tomorrow and those guys were rested in that spot. They obviously could have pitched, but I mean, we're nitpicking here, all right? You look at the game overall, the Mets had some opportunities where they should have scored more runs. Tylor McGill only got them through 4 and, coughed up the lead. So look, I don't blame this one on Buck Showalter by any stretch of the imagination, and overall, I really don't blame a series split on anyone other than, David Peterson being awful in that Saturday game. But I still look at what the Mets did on this road trip as a team, considering all of the obstacles they overcome. Scherzer's ejected in the middle of a game. You still win it. I mean, they really did have a great West Coast trip to win 7 of those 10 games. We'll see how other NL East teams fare when they head out west for 10. That is not an easy part of your schedule. I don't care if you played the A's and the Giants. It's very hard to go on the West Coast and win baseball games, and the Mets did that more than they didn't. And now they get a day to recoup, to figure some things out. and then they got a series against the Nationals before a very pivotal weekend series against the Atlanta Braves. We're going to get into where they're at with this pitching because they are in dire straits. But I will also give you some reasons for optimism too when it comes to the starting lineup. Before we get to any of that though, today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, especially because we're always growing and changing. And that is why therapy is such a good tool, because it helps you deepen your self-awareness and understanding, because sometimes we don't know what we want or how or why we react the way we do until we talk through things. Personally, I've been in therapy a lot of times in my life. First, when I was in school as a kid, dealing with some attention issues and other things. But later, when I was trying to find myself as a man, therapy was very key to me, understanding who I am. It's just great to talk to someone that's not a member of your family, to just get an unbiased opinion. And that's what BetterHelp does. They'll connect you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are and really find what you're looking for. And it's entirely done online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you do is you fill out a brief questionnaire to get you matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge if you're just not finding that connection that you need. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnMLB today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnMLB to find BetterHelp today. Looking for a delicious snack but don't want all the sugar and calories? Then you need to try the best tasting protein bar ever, Built. You got to try Built bars. What makes them so good, they're covered in 100% real dark chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. They come in unbelievable flavors like the churro, the peanut butter brownie, and the cookies and cream, with only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. You also don't have to wait for a box anymore. You can still go to Built.com and get them shipped to you and try any of their amazing flavors. You can even get the mixed box where you can try a little bit of everything. But if you are listening right now and you want a Built bar, go to your local Walmart, go to the pharmacy section. You can grab a 4-bar box of their cookies and cream, double chocolate, or the coconut puffs. Or you can go to Sam's Club, grab a 13-bar box of their hit flavors, brownie, batter puff, or the churro puff. You can thank me later. Go to your local store and buy Built bars today. So the New York Mets are in a bad place right now when it comes to the starting pitching, because Scherzer is still suspended. You don't have Verlander, you don't have Carrasco. But there is some good news on the Verlander front. He went out, he threw 3 innings of a sim game, over 40 pitches. So you're nearing a return. He's going to go for a rehab start. I believe it's still scheduled for the 28th, and that will put him in line to make his season debut in Detroit, of all places, where he is very familiar. So that could be a nice soft landing spot for him. It's not the home opener that I'm sure he would have loved to pitch in, but that's a good place for the Mets to be, and that has him coming right after that series against the Braves. Obviously, it'd be great to have him in that one, but look, if Verlander's back, we're talking about basically next week, and you get Scherzer off the suspension, okay, this Mets team, you can breathe, right? You just have to really get through that Braves series is the one that I think you're most concerned about. Right now, the way the Mets are lining up, you have the off day on Monday. They're TBD for that start on Tuesday. I'd imagine Jose Budo, I would think, but we'll see what they ultimately decide to do. They could even go bullpen game if they really wanted to. You're playing the Nationals, so you could get away with it, but then you got to really hope you get length from Kodai Senga and Joey Lucchesi to close out that series, and it's crazy to think that right now, that's as good as I feel about the Mets rotation. After that start that Lucchesi had, I'm like, all right, we got Lucchesi going Thursday. Feels good to have that. And, Kodai Senga pitching against a bad Nationals team. I think you're going to see the best version of him in that one. So I think for this series, the Mets are in pretty good shape. Surprisingly enough, though, they're facing 3 pitchers that actually have had some good starts to the season. Josiah Gray's numbers aren't bad. I mean, he's 0-4, but 3.74 ERA isn't atrocious. Mackenzie Gore's actually looked nasty from the left side this year, 3.43 ERA. Then you get to T-Will, Trevor Williams. Good to see him back, I guess, on the Citi Field mound, 3.38 ERA. But overall, the Mets are going to be able to cobble together some pitching. I think they'll be just fine playing at home against the Nationals. There should be no reason why they don't take that series and no reason why they don't take all 3 games, to be completely honest. even with the pitching in the condition that's at. And then you look at what they're going to do over the weekend. I believe Scherzer's eligible to return on Sunday the 30th. So I would imagine he's going to be able to start that one. It's going to be David Peterson, I think. Well, he's right now scheduled. Then Tylor McGill, I'm imagining, on Saturday before you get to Scherzer on Sunday. So not to look too far into the future, but you're basically just going to be hoping for a coin flip victory in one of those two games, or you just find a way with maybe Peterson or McGill having a good start against a really tough team with the Braves. But then that's where things should be okay. So even though the rotation's in bad condition, assuming Scherzer starts on Sunday, then you get Verlander in that series. And all of these guys are basically on audition. Kodai Senga, I think his spot in the rotation is solidified, obviously. But outside of that, it's like, all right, all these guys get a turn. Maybe it's Budo on Tuesday, Lucchesi on Thursday, Peterson on Friday, McGill on Saturday likely, and you're going to be bumping, some guys from the rotation. Budo, if he does make the spot start, he's likely going to be back down very quickly. But, Lucchesi could pitch himself into this rotation. Peterson could certainly pitch himself out of it. We'll just see where everything falls as we get into next week. But that's where we're at with the starting pitching. I will say this lineup is just cruising right now. I have no qualms about it. I think you're going to start to see Brett Beatty and Francisco Alvarez get more acclimated and be bigger impact players. I think this series with the Nationals is great for them. I would start them both. Obviously they're probably going to have Nito, behind the plate for Senga, but I'd start Alvarez the other two games. I'd start Beatty every single one of these games, even against the lefty and Gore, and just let them play, especially against that team, and particularly those bullpens, or that bullpen later in the game, because I think these guys will get comfortable and they'll help you. And then what you're getting right now from Alonso, from McNeil and Nimmo off a great road trip from Lindor, even guys like Daniel Vogelbach swinging the bat better. I think this lineup is going to be able to handle themselves well in this upcoming series and even against the Braves. And this is still, to me, the same Mets team we saw last year that won over 100 games. So I would not be concerned because they lost a couple on a row to close out a really tough West Coast trip. They kind of just slipped at the end after putting together a great couple weeks of baseball. But we'll be back tomorrow for another edition of Locked On Mets ahead of that series against the Nationals. I'll probably do a deep dive on Nimmo's start, McNeil, that core four, what we've seen as we have a little bit of time with the off day to really go deep on some statistical analysis. So make sure you everydayers check that out. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter @FinkelsteinRyan and follow the show at Locked On Mets.